New requirements that you need to observe if you have a small business. That's our topic in this segment of the program here on Dollars and Cents. So welcome into the program. We're one of Central Florida's longest running radio programs. Also a top 25 podcasts out there on the World Wide Web. So make sure you check us out on your favorite platform of choice. Once you find us, make sure you subscribe to us so that way you'll get notified when we put up new information, new shows, and the like on those various channels. Any trouble at all finding us, go to our website. It's Nelson Financial Planning, and there you'll see a bunch of icons. Click on the one that looks most familiar, and you will get automatically connected through the magic and wizardry known as the internet. So my name, of course, is Joel Garris. I'm a certified financial planner, certified financial fiduciary at Nelson Financial Planning. Joining me on this week's program, Rob Field, a fellow certified financial fiduciary, also happens to be a National Social Security advisor. Welcome on back into the program, Rob. So we're talking about the Corporate Transparency Act and what small businesses now need to do starting in 2024 under that legislation. So what are we going to have to do as in small business America to comply with this thing?
All right, so we know it's important. The government has said this is going to occur. So we did some research, and we're going to share with our listeners the specifics of what it is and what they'll have to do and how it'll affect them.
Perfect.
We know that under the new legislation that businesses that meet certain criteria are going to have to submit what's called a Beneficial Ownership Information Report, or we'll call it a BOI. That's got to go to the Department of Treasury, and it's got to go through the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or FinCEN. That sounds pretty serious, right? A group that's enforcing network crime? Come on.
So I'll tell you a side story on the FinCEN. You know, in the prior segment, I was talking a little bit about, you know, some of the things that we asked from our clients, right, that we didn't have to do prior to 9/11.
Right.
And FinCEN and our familiarity in sort of the back office with FinCEN, we didn't know who FinCEN was prior to 9/11, but now we do. I would say for probably the better part of the past 20 years, every 2 weeks, our firm, as a securities broker-dealer registered under the SEC, gets an email from these folks at FinCEN, the same people that you're going to have to go online to and report who owns your company. So FinCEN every 2 weeks sends us a list of people that are suspected terrorists, suspected terrorist business, suspected bad guys, I guess is the only way to say it. And we are required to search our database for any of those names, any of those companies, any of that. And heaven forbid if we have a hit, because there's a lot of filing, a lot of contact, a lot of information. The good news is in the 20 years we've been kind of doing that, haven't had that experience, so that's good. But the reality is that FinCEN, for many people, at least in the financial industry, the brokerage side, and the investment advisory side, of course, familiar with it because there is that requirement. So now, along with like the list of terrorists that come from FinCEN, now Small Business America has to go to FinCEN and tell FinCEN who they are. Is that kind of the gist of this thing?
Correct. It's basically, who am I? What do I do? And I got to prove that
it's like the giant Santa's list. I mean, if you're on the naughty list, you're in real serious trouble. Is what it comes down to. So what's sort of considered? I mean, talk about, okay, so I got to go and I got to report the beneficial ownership of my business. What is that like? What does that mean? And who does that apply to, Rob?
All right, so who is considered a beneficial owner? Because that's what they're going after. And that, by definition, Corporate Transparency Act is saying that's an individual that qualifies as an owner if they directly or indirectly have a significant ownership stake in a company. This person either has a major influence on the reporting company's decisions or operations, or owns at least 25% of the company's shares, or has a similar level of control over the company's equity.
So basically, who's the suit or who's the owner behind that particular entity? That's what they're trying to drill down to.
Right. They want to know the owner, and then they want to know anybody that has an influence or is moving paperwork or is in charge of how the company runs. They're looking for a long list of people that are active at that company.
So tell us a little bit more. Are there exemptions? Who does this actually apply to? Like what's the parameters so we our listeners can understand that?
Right. They put out a list of 23 categories that they would consider exempt, and we can share that at a later time. But for the most part, it's anything like a publicly traded company. Banks and credit unions would be exempt. Securities broker-dealers would be exempt, a public accounting firm, and then an actual tax-exempt entity. Now, they've kind of defined some large entities that could be exempt, and they're saying that would be somebody that has over 20 employees, reported annual gross revenue over $5 million, or has a physical presence in the U.S.
So I'm going to just pause right there because I want to focus on something you said in that. So large operating entities are generally generally exempt, as I understand it.
Correct, because they're already reporting a lot of different things. They're already being seen in their activities, already under review. It's the small companies that come and go that sort of have these quasi, what do the company really do? They've been under the radar screen for a while.
Well, and I guess this really kind of gets to my point, which is that this is really something that affects small businesses. Because if you go back to the definition of what kind of a large company is, those aren't necessarily particularly large companies. You've got, it's 20 employees, okay, revenue of $5 million. Those aren't necessarily overly large companies. I mean, it seems like this is targeted directly to smaller businesses, smaller companies. Because again, having a payroll with 20 people, a revenue of $5 million, those aren't, in today's world, those aren't necessarily large companies like we would think of as large companies. So clearly a focus kind of more on kind of those smaller businesses. So okay. So let me make sure we got it and our listeners got it. So if you own a company, it's not exempt. And by the way, given the $500 a day penalty, you probably want to assume that you're not exempt unless you're like a bank or a publicly traded company or a securities broker dealer. So you go to FinCEN, which is a part of the U.S. Treasury. What do you have to tell them?
You brought up the small businesses. This is going to affect 32 million small businesses. So, anybody who's like, I probably don't need to worry about it, probably lean towards, submit your paperwork.
32 million.
Is the estimate number.
Wow. So what are these 32 million small business owners going to have to report?
All right. So it's a long list, and you got to put down what's the purpose of your business.
Does it include blood type? I mean,
not yet. But I mean, this was just this is the first year. A year from now, they're going to go. You know what? We want more information. Blood type would be good. At this point, though, you got to tell them what the purpose of your business is. Who are the owners? Who are the company applicants? People that are involved with any of the paperwork. Your address, birthdays, some kind of identification number, a license or a passport, jurisdiction of the documents, where do they come from. All reporting companies are going to provide their legal name, any trademarks, their current address, and then the tax identification number. Right now, there's not an annual reporting in place. They're not saying every year you got to do this, but we're in the initial part. But even after you do the initial, anytime you have the smallest of change, you still got to submit a new report.
Right,
if
I
you
saw that. Yeah.
Change your address, your legal name, if you get married or divorced, if you got a new driver's license, all of these things, you have to submit another report to FinCEN.
And FinCEN has some very tight rules, right? It's like 30 days that you would then need to make sure that you're updating for any changes. So address changes, driver's license, whatever the case may be, you got to make sure that you're going over to the FinCEN website and updating all of that information.
Correct. It is online. The website is, and we'll refer this to a couple times, it is, FinCEN or FINCEN.gov/BOI. We're going to talk next a little bit about when people have to do their initial, but for right now, once you've done your initial, if you make a change, 30 days max, and you got to report the change.
Yeah, that's okay. So I'm going to have a summary of all of this in our view from the lens of not a certified financial planner or certified financial fiduciary, but rather from the lens of a small business owner, because after all, that's what we are at Nelson Financial Planning. So We're going to continue this. We're taking a little bit longer than I thought on this, but I think it's a good topic. So we're going to continue this through this next break. So stay tuned with us here on Dollars and Cents with Joel Garris and Rob Field of Nelson Financial Planning.